Am I the asshole for not staying with my wife after her C-section? My wife was admitted to hospital for an induction of our second child. She had a rough time during her first pregnancy, as it was during lockdown, UK. I was not allowed to stay during this time, so she asked that I stay each night with her during this pregnancy. She gets quite anxious and wanted me there for support during the night, as she didn't feel comfortable asking the night staff. We came to the hospital 2 a.m. on Sunday morning where she was put on a ward and started on hormones. The labor wasn't progressing very quickly, so she told me to go home around 9 a.m. as she'd need me when the baby came. I came back in the evening and she told me to go home and rest around midnight. I came up early Monday morning and spent the day with her and went home around 5 to spend time with our daughter, staying with my parents. I got a call at 1 a.m. Tuesday from her. She thought she was in labor but didn't think the staff were taking her seriously. I rushed up to the ward. Baby was born 3 hours later via an emergency C-section. We were moved around a fair bit until we were settled in a ward around 4 p.m. on Tuesday. Both extremely tired, her obviously much more, but we managed a few hours as they had a little sofa I could lay down on. I got up throughout the night to help with baby so she could rest. Wednesday we had a nap during the day, but I stayed all day. This is where the question arose. The baby was noted to have a health problem and so has been taken for further tests. I took the baby as my wife had trouble walking during the pregnancy due to pelvic pain. This has continued, and so she is in a lot of pain quite often, combined with the surgery. They needed to move us to another ward to observe the baby, but this ward does not have a pull-out bed for partners. I have lower back pain, so I've carried a cushion around to alleviate it while she's been in hospital. It doesn't do much, but it means I can sit in the chairs for a bit rather than needing to lie down. I've told me wife that I couldn't stay as I wouldn't be able to sit in the chair all night with no sleep. She expected me to stay the night and continue to help her out during the day. I feel really bad about it, but I wouldn't be able to sleep at all, and sitting in the chair would just further screw up my back. Then I'd be of no use the next day without sleep and with back pain. I set everything up for my wife to make it easier for her during the night. I spoke to the staff and told them how anxious she is and that she'd need extra help, and told my wife to ask for help when she needed it. I left at 12 a.m. and came back when the doors opened next morning. I've been taking over during the day and letting her rest when she wants to. My argument is that I can't physically stay awake all night and all day. Although I'd agreed to stay all night with her before admission, I thought at least I'd be able to lie down. AITA. Edit. I didn't stay with my wife after giving birth, even though she'd asked me well beforehand, and I'd agreed. Comment. NAH. And I've been the wife post C-section. Our kid got readmitted when she was 3 days old, and I had to stay with her, attempting to feed her, pump, and give her a bottle every hour. It was the worst night of my life, but my husband was dead on his feet. He needed to get some actual sleep so he could help us the next day. He needed enough rest to safely drive us home again. It's an awful situation, but you're not an AH. I can't honestly call your wife an AH either. I have some PTSD from that night and would never want to do it again. The two of you are against the rubbish situation together and not against each other. NAH, there's a reason why on planes they instruct you to put on your oxygen mask first and then help your child. If you are not safe, well rested, you cannot take of anyone properly. Given that your wife was in the hospital and had nursing staff and doctors, she could call for assistance if needed. It was okay for you to ensure you were well rested to support her during the day. However, once your wife comes back home, you will need to ensure you can support her 24/7. Info. When did you realize you'd have to go home? Did you just spring it on her, or did you all talk about it when you got to the new room? Because you had all the data you needed when you got to the new room to warn her you might need to go back on your promise. Did you check if she'd rather you tough it through the night and go home to rest during the day? Or did you just abandon her last minute to spend the night alone with your baby because you didn't want to feel ashamed earlier by bringing it up when plans could actually be talk her out? Update 1. After I left the hospital and came back the next morning, my wife looked at me with a worried expression, but I could see the obvious exhaustion in her eyes. I knew she felt a bit disappointed that I didn't stay the night, even though she didn't say anything. I felt really bad about my decision, but I also couldn't deceive my body. The constant back pain throughout the day made it difficult for me to think clearly, and I knew I had to take care of myself if I wanted to have the strength to support her in the coming days. We talked a lot about my decision that morning, and I explained why I couldn't stay overnight, that I truly couldn't sit in a chair all night without sleep. She listened to me, but I could feel the exhaustion and disappointment hidden behind her words. I also felt like I wasn't doing enough, not strong enough to face these difficulties with her. After the baby was examined and some health issues were discovered, we faced even more challenges. My wife was constantly worried about the condition of our child, and the pain from the surgery made everything harder. However, I realized that despite some misunderstandings, my love and support were the most important things at that moment. In the days that followed, I stayed by my wife's and child's side, trying to change my approach to lessen the burden on her. I sought additional ways to comfort her, from helping with the baby care to having brief conversations when we could relax a bit. Although there were moments when I felt incapable of handling everything, I realized that my presence, though imperfect, was exactly what my wife needed most. The following days were a considerable challenge, but I knew that together we could overcome everything, even if the road ahead might be long and difficult. I've realized that in times of hardship, we can't always be perfect, but sincerity and relentless effort are what create the greatest strength in our relationship. Update 2. On the 5th day after the baby was born, when everything seemed to be stabilizing, an unexpected event occurred that made everything more tense than ever. My wife, though she had rested a little, was still in constant pain and worried about our child's condition. I knew she was tired and just wanted a little time to relax, but I also understood that she couldn't do that in her current state. One afternoon, while I was in the hospital room taking care of my wife and the baby, a nurse came in with a serious expression. She told us that there were some issues with the baby's test results that we needed to address immediately. We need to take the baby for further tests, as there could be a more serious issue with the baby's health, she said coldly. My heart sank, and worry overtook me. I looked at my wife and saw that she was equally anxious, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep and the ongoing pain. "What do you think, babe?" she asked me, her voice trembling, clearly filled with an indescribable fear. I tried to reassure her, but inside I couldn't hide my own anxiety. "We'll get through this. Don't worry," I replied, though I couldn't fully understand what was happening. The nurse quickly took the baby away, and my wife collapsed onto the bed, gripping the blanket tightly. We sat in silence, only hearing the sound of my wife's heartbeat monitor and the hurried footsteps of medical staff running back and forth. At that moment, I felt my own weakness, the helplessness of not being able to do anything more than just wait. After an hour of tension, the medical staff returned, and I could see the change in their faces. One of the doctors entered, and while I couldn't understand everything she said, I could feel that something had changed. "The baby will be fine," she said, and while I felt a bit of relief, I still couldn't fully trust her words. "We've found the cause and will continue to monitor, but for now, the baby's condition has stabilized." My wife looked at me, and I looked at her, both of us letting out a sigh of relief. Although everything wasn't completely over, it felt like a nightmare had momentarily paused. But I also knew that we had overcome a big challenge and that we'd still face more difficult days ahead, taking care of the baby and supporting each other. When I returned to the hospital room that evening, I looked at my wife and could feel her exhaustion and depletion. She smiled weakly, but I could tell that she needed me more than ever. I decided to stay longer, even though my body still ached, but I knew that now I had to be the strong one. My presence wasn't just to help her feel reassured, but was necessary for us to overcome the challenges ahead. That night, I held my wife's hand, promising to always be by her side, no matter what happened. Everything could change unexpectedly, but we would never let go of each other. Update 3. A few weeks after the incident with the baby, things began to return to normal. The baby, although still needing further health monitoring for a while, gradually stabilized and showed signs of positive recovery. My wife, after a long period of facing pain and challenges following her C-section, started to feel better. However, those stressful days left me with deep reflections about love, resilience, and the values we have built together. I remember the moments when I stayed awake all night, sitting next to my wife when she was anxious, when she needed a strong shoulder to feel secure. I also remember the tension and worry every time I heard news from the doctor about the baby's condition. But all those worries gradually faded when I saw the baby getting healthier and my wife's smile slowly returning to her face. I realized that sometimes in life, we can't do everything perfectly. We may get tired, we may make mistakes, but the important thing is always to maintain companionship, love, and support for each other during difficult times. My wife and I went through a big challenge, and through it, our love became stronger than ever. Finally, we returned home, welcoming our newborn with immense happiness. Even though life is never perfect, I know that we will always be together, sharing all the struggles and enjoying the wonderful moments together. And that's all I need: family, love, and the strength to overcome any challenge.